Okay, now is the time to introduce our speaker. Shelley Repp, Executive Director of New Mexico Dream Center. Shelley is the Executive Director of the New Mexico Dream Center since 2018. She first became aware of domestic minor sex trafficking, DMST, in 2010 when a struggling high school senior from Highland High School was referred to her for help. After meeting the struggling girl, Shelley realized that she had just come face-to-face with a sex trafficked victim. Shelley began researching the sex trafficking of American children and then started putting together a program to support victims. She founded Spoke For in 2011 to provide resources for human trafficking victims. Shelley was recruited by the newly formed New Mexico Human Trafficking Task Force in 2016. During this time, she continued her human trafficking education, provided direct services for survivors of human trafficking, and consulted on legislation and policy. Shelley also developed the Harbor, Albuquerque's first unhoused youth drop-off center, to provide low-barrier services to vulnerable, unhoused teen population. Shelley's leadership, New Mexico Dream Center has increased its programming, providing emergency services, shelter, transitional housing, and case management for survivors of human trafficking, as well as increasing programming at the Unhoused Youth Drop-Off Center. If we could give a warm welcome to Shelley Repp. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today. I am just really thrilled to be here, and I'm especially thrilled, Laura, thank you so much for getting this set up with us. Let me get my tech back up over here. There we go. Look at that, it works. Isn't it always a good day when tech works? Because I feel like we walk in this gray area of maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. But again, thank you so much for having me today. I love being able to talk with populations that we don't have an audience with a lot at New Mexico Dream Center. We do a lot of awareness and a lot of training, but with that, it's almost always service providers or hospitals or law enforcement. So when we're able to get out into other areas that are actually impacted by trafficking and have some voice there, I just find that as one of the most wonderful things we can do. So with New Mexico Dream Center, this slide just shows a list of the different services that we provide. But our mission is really to look at human trafficking in New Mexico with a 360-degree approach. And what that means is we are looking at the push and pull factors that would cause somebody to come into a trafficking situation. Looking at what outreach is to this population. How do we provide assistance in a way that will actually help a victim come out of trafficking, exit trafficking, and then be able to get their wheels under them and go forward. And then looking at prevention. How do we prevent this from continuing to happen in our state, and especially for the young people that is really the target population for human trafficking victims. So today, this program is specifically towards the hospitality industry, so it is for all of you kinds of folks. And as we go through this, I just want you to know that I would love to continue to be a resource with you as much as possible. New Mexico Dream Center does a lot of trainings, and we would love to be able to help train any staff that you might have that you feel this would be beneficial for, or anything that you think would be another way to look at this, this problem. Would love to learn from you as well. So the first thing we always do is we always talk about what trafficking actually is. And so in the state of New Mexico, we go by the federal definition of both sex and labor trafficking. So A up there is sex trafficking, and B is labor trafficking. And it's important to understand that within the hotel industry, there is both sex and labor trafficking happening across the United States. A lot of times people will think that human trafficking really is almost relegated to more of the foreign national population, and while we do see that, what we actually see in the United States is that we have a very large trafficked population of domestic people, the people who are born here in the United States. In fact, the Department of Justice had released some stats for 2021, and they were able to count 14,000 foreign nationals who came into the United States and were trafficked. And we know that that number is way underreported because when you're looking at a crime, you're not always going to have the exact number. But 14,000 was what the Department of Justice was able to count for foreign nationals. But their number was 175,000 domestic victims of human trafficking within the United States. So the number of trafficked people born in the United States is actually quite large and larger than foreign nationals. So here is the state of New Mexico. This is a heat map that is produced by the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And so with that, I circled the state of New Mexico to make it easy for you. But essentially what you're seeing is where the calls are coming in reporting trafficking within our state. As we look at that, we can see at the bottom border of our state, right there where we meet up with Texas and Mexico, our port of entry through Ciudad de Juarez, right there as being a really big red spot. So we know that we absolutely have trafficking that's coming in there, both sex and labor. But as we continue and look at the state, if you go east, and we look at that kind of corner area in Texas and then up along that east border, we see a fair amount of trafficking reports coming in there as well. Any ideas of why we'd be getting trafficking calls from that part of the state? So that's the Permian Basin. Those are our oil fields. And so we see trafficking happening out in those oil fields. And again, that is sex trafficking as well as labor trafficking. We partner a lot with APD, and recently APD was talking about how they had some information about a trafficking ring out there, and essentially they found a like Connex trailer, those commercial trailers that had a bed and a bucket, and basically they were setting up dates for people out in those oil fields in that trailer. So as an example of what that kind of human trafficking could look like. As you kind of hopscotch across the middle of the state and into the Four Corners area, we see some more hits there. And what we see there those are all related to the casinos on the native lands. And so we're seeing some hits coming up from those casinos. And then, of course, the Four Corners area is the Navajo Nation, and we know that there's trafficking happening on our native lands. And then smack dab in the middle is the city of Albuquerque.
That's not Santa Fe?
It looks like it could be Santa Fe. It's kind of that central corridor, but it's mostly Albuquerque. And what we know about Albuquerque that contributes to that being a kind of big hot spot is that we have, we're the population center. And so we have over a third of the entire state's population within the Albuquerque metro area. So we've got a lot of people here. Human trafficking is very much population related. So as you look at the whole United States, where you see these other hot spots are much more densely populated areas than where New Mexico is. I mean, honestly, we know that we hear that there are more cows in New Mexico than people, so we are going to have a smaller signature because of that. But Albuquerque has the biggest population. A couple of other things about Albuquerque that do contribute to that, that heat stamp is that we've got I-40 and I-25 that cross in Albuquerque with some truck stops that are known for trafficking, so we see that happening. We also have the large-scale events, or tend to have large-scale events here, so think about like Gathering of Nations, the State Fair, International Balloon Fiesta, and whenever you have an influx of population, you are going to see an increase in trafficking. And so those are some of the things that contribute to that trafficking picture here in the state of New Mexico. So what does this have to do with you all? Well, these are some of the stats that we've been able to compile about human trafficking and what is happening in hotels. In fact, it used to be that a lot of the trafficking that happened was actually like street level trafficking, where there would be somebody who would be perceived as a prostitute who would be on the street, and we would see the trafficking happening there. What we've seen now is that trafficking recruitment, the setting up of dates for the trafficker with the trafficking victim is happening online. It's happening through mobile apps, meetup apps, it's happening through things like Facebook, Instagram, all of those social media platforms. And so as we see that, the transition from street-based trafficking, it's still there, but mostly it is going towards what's happening in the hotels and motels in any particular community. So as we look at these types of things, hotels can be involved in a multifaceted aspect of human trafficking. So traffickers are absolutely looking for a place to be able to put those victims for dates. They will oftentimes try to keep a trafficking victim for multiple nights in the same place because that's just easier for them. We see that trafficking can be part of the whole supply chain. So that could be labor trafficking as well. So looking at the supply chain aspect. But they are capitalizing on you not knowing or expecting it to happen in your hotel or motel. And so their assumption of your not understanding or not looking for it is benefiting them within this. One of the stats we talk about a lot is how much money do traffickers actually make? When you look at trafficking globally, it brings in over $150 billion. And so it is, and that's illegal money. So that is, funds that are not being taxed. That's not going into benefit a community. That is illegal gain. In New Mexico and in Albuquerque, we are a service provider, and so we actually asked one of our victims to kind of break it down. What is the math? What is a trafficker actually making? And essentially for her, she was part of a 4-person trafficking ring, so a very small trafficking ring. 1 trafficker, 4 girls that he was trafficking. And so with that, each of those girls had a $500 a day quota. So they had to make $500 before they could go to sleep or eat or any of those things. But this trafficker, he was just so nice. He only made him work 6 days a week. And so for her, with that $500 quota, that equaled about $50 for a commercial sex act, which was about 20 minutes. So she'd have to do that about 10 times a day. And that equaled about $165,000 cash, unaccounted for, just through her. So with the 4 of them, it was over $600,000 that this trafficker was gaining from this very small time trafficking situation. So this is a lot of money. This is big money. There's a lot of motivation for traffickers to do that. And in our state, we have very poor legislation addressing the crime of trafficking. So in New Mexico, it is much easier to traffic a person than any of our surrounding states. In fact, if you get caught and you are charged with trafficking a small amount of cocaine, your minimum sentence starts at 6 years. If you are caught and you are charged trafficking a person in the state of New Mexico right now, and they don't elevate that to any sort of federal charges, your sentence starts at 3 years. So right now, there's a big imbalance in what is happening on the prosecutorial aspect when it comes to human trafficking. But we know that it's continuing and that it's growing. The last number on here is that there were 294 cases of labor exploitations in hotels and motels in 2020-21 that was reported. So in looking at that, we have to remember that human trafficking is crime, so it is always going to be underreported. This is specific to labor trafficking, and so this is even more underreported than sex trafficking, because many times with labor trafficking, that victim is a foreign national and does not even understand that they would have any rights within our state or that there could be any benefit for them in reporting. So we see that as vastly underreported. So what's it actually look like? So this is kind of what we are seeing here within Albuquerque and kind of across the state for human trafficking. We see a lot of independent hotels and motels that are willing to rent rooms by the hour, or they have a night manager who is willing to work with a trafficker and rent those rooms. In fact, we've seen that quite a lot on the Central Corridor with some of those independently owned hotels and motels. We've got the motel chains with the desk staff that will offer those under the table deals. And so it's something that we see over and over and over again. One of the kind of big cases we've seen in New Mexico and actually across the United States is Motel 6. And so they had some litigation brought against them because they had managers in each of those motels who were willing to kind of do this under the table dealing. Here in Albuquerque, those big I motels that are known for their truckers are absolutely a base for a lot of trafficking. We do outreach, and we've been able to see from our outreach destinations, traffickers send girls over to the different hotels, to the different trucks also within those areas. And so we see it as something that's really prolific and prevalent. Weekly and monthly motels are very common venues, and we've seen them we've had reports from every single one of the hotels in Albuquerque that are those kind of extended stay style types of motels. Casino hotels are huge for something like that, and especially within the native lands. There's not a lot of resources, there's not a lot of reporting for those folks as well, but we do see them also in the expensive hotels. We've had referrals from Hotel Chaco, from Hotel Albuquerque. We've had them from Nativo Lodge, where trafficking has happened in all of these other hotels that are upscale hotels. So we know that it absolutely is happening across the city of Albuquerque and across the state of New Mexico. Basically, peak reservations equals peak trafficking. Again, because it's population-based, and when we kind of think of somebody who might be coming into our city or into our state who is interested in purchasing sex, they might not do that in their home community because there's kind of some natural barriers to that. But if they're thinking about that, coming into a different area absolutely allows for them to make those kinds of decisions if that's what they're looking for. So what are some of the warning signs we see for labor trafficking within a hotel? This is a short list of what it looks like. We've seen labor trafficking victims held in hotels. They might work somewhere else, but then their trafficker will rent a couple of hotel rooms or motel rooms and keep those labor trafficking victims in there. One of the big things is seeing with some of our smaller hotels or motels or locally owned ones where they're actually offered rooms to stay in as part of their compensation, but then they're not actually compensated. So this is a list of those warning signs for labor trafficking. And so what are the warning signs for sex trafficking? Again, a list of some of the things that we see as super common in there. Nowadays, I know a lot of the hotels or motels don't take cash, but that is one of the signs that we've seen is when somebody is wanting to pay cash. Looking for different credit cards or using different credit cards is another one that would be a really big red flag to look at this. A few more of those sex trafficking issues to look at or the things that might help contribute to what sex trafficking could look like in there. Some of the big ones that we've seen where actually hotel or motel staff have identified is when somebody's coming in but they don't have luggage, but they're carrying in something like in a laundry basket. Or they're local and they're coming in with a laundry basket. So some things like that would be some to look at. And then here's some things for you all to consider. We've only had a really short time, so we're going quick on this. Train your staff. Develop a plan. What can you look for and how can you respond? Establish a safe and secure reporting mechanism. When we develop a response plan, then it empowers your staff to look for this, and then it allows also a great interaction for us as the service providers to be able to provide those services for those folks. This is our contact information. If you would like for us to come and train with you, or if we do have a longer presentation around this too that we would love to present. So there's our contact information. This PowerPoint has been sent to Carl, and so I think he's going to put it on the website as well. And then I do have a couple of other resources for you if you're interested. If you just want to know about us, I'm happy to tell you about New Mexico Dream Center and what we're doing. But we also have put together an information kind of packet for you. This is like a little toolkit that has QR codes that will take you to source materials that you can use for your own training or to get more information as well. And so I have both of these resources for you guys as well. Well, I again want to thank you so much for your time today. I know we're over by a few minutes. Again, we've got these resources, but they are also going to be on the website. You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and attention today.